Different kind of roast.
Yeah.
Good morning. It's good to be back with you. Welcome to the Leonard Church. We have been doing our Revelation study, and the last time I was with you, we got to the very end of chapter 3, and we were doing our verse by verse study. And we had a few verses left, and the more and more that I looked into it, the sermon that I had during that worship service hour, the last Sunday I was with you, was basically over that last of the chapter 3. So I decided instead of wearing out chapter 3 more than what we've already done, we would go right into chapter 4. And so we are going to be digging deep today moving forward. As we study the book in chapter 4, I will not finish this chapter today. I can already assure you of that. There's probably 30 slides that we got to get through. So, yeah, get ready to take some notes, I guess I can say. Now, when we get to chapter 4, your Bible may call it the heavenly throne room of God, or the throne room of God, however it's worded in your Bibles. And Aiden read the entirety of that chapter. I appreciated that. But we will be looking at the chapter verse by verse as we study. But before we do that, I want to look at another approach, and that is, if you haven't guessed it already, the cultural context. We got to kind of see how John is playing not only on Old Testament scriptures, the Tanakh, the Jewish scriptures, but also where are the cultural connections that the first century Christians reading the letter would have been more familiar with. And again, I say, as we always look at the book, we have to have two keys in order to unlock the mystery of the Revelation letter. And they are cultural context. And so I ask you the question this morning, who is John writing to? Who's the audience?
The dispersed Christians.
Okay? Yeah. Particularly in the region of where? Asia Minor. Okay. In particular, he is writing to 7 of these. They just happen to be, coincidentally, on the Roman mail route. Pretty convenient locations for the letters to be delivered to. And what were the current events of the day in the first century? Whether it be mid or to the end of the first century, whichever camp you think Revelation was written in, whether it be 60-ish AD or 90-ish AD, it's still the same in my book. What were the current events of their day?
The Christians were being persecuted.
Okay, the church in particular was being greatly persecuted, absolutely, in either of those eras. What else?
Pagan worship was common. Pagan worship was common.
Pagan worship was everywhere. In every city that we looked at in the 7, pagan worship was dominant over anything else, wasn't it? What else? How were the Roman Caesars of that time? Were they great? Were they very, thumbs down? Colosseum over. Yeah, they were terrible. They were wicked men. Most of them were very, very wicked. And they carried out this persecution on both Christian and Jew. Now, understand the difference. Judaism had a certain exception within the Roman Empire. They were allowed to practice their religion as long as when they would sacrifice, they pretty much sacrificed on behalf of the current Caesar. That makes sense. But it still was not one of the 24 legal state religions. Did not make the list. And Christianity didn't have any exceptions, nor were they on the list either.
They were the atheists.
They were the atheists of their day, absolutely. And again, I asked the question, what was the culture like? I think we just answered that in its entirety. It was a very pagan culture. It was a world where if you were in the city and you were close to a shrine of Caesar, if someone spotted you not dropping incense in the fire, you could be told on. Authorities could arrest you. You could be persecuted. You could be even executed. And there were many forms that they would carry that act out that we've looked at so far. Then we have to have another key. Because we don't just need to understand the culture of the day. I think that understanding the culture will really put Revelation in a great perspective. But you got to have another one. And that is the Tanakh. We commonly know him more popularly in our culture as the Old Testament. A great percentage of Revelation has ties and references that go back to the Old Testament scriptures. Many scrolls that John took source material from were Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Daniel, Zechariah, Ezekiel, First Chronicles, and the Psalms, and Isaiah. In chapter 4, when he basically gets called up in this vision, we will see many references to Exodus, to Daniel, to Ezekiel, and to Isaiah right off the bat. Every single verse has a connection to the Old Testament in chapter 4. We don't have to try to fantasize future events on these scriptures. We don't need to do that. We don't have to do that. John is trying to preach the message to the Christians who were being so vastly persecuted that they probably felt like giving up. And he's trying to tell them. Jesus is trying to tell John to tell them that everything is going to work out. Do not give up. Continue to fight. Continue to race. Finish the fight. Paul would use similar language in his letters as well. Now, before we go into chapter 4 verse by verse study, I want to look at some other cultural context connections. In particularly, when this letter was penned, there was a very famous athletic event that always took place every year. The Olympics. Made famous by the Greeks. All the Greeks loved the Olympics. Alexander the Great loved those Olympics. That was one of the pillars of Hellenism for Alexander the Great. Athletics. Keep the people entertained. I know it sounds kind of familiar to today. But yeah. And then when the Romans came into power, they adopted it, but sort of upgraded it. When you competed in the Olympics in these days, it wasn't about your individual talent. Now that was important. But you were racing, you were fighting, you were competing for your God of your city. And what have we noticed in these 7 cities? Every one of them had a different patron god or goddess. So if you were a racer from Ephesus, you were competing for Diana, also known as Artemis. And your talent and your victory was credited to her. In today's Olympics, it's the country, right? Now, let's look at some interesting connections here. And I do want to say that the chariot races of the Roman world were the most popular and famous entertainment attraction of their day. They loved the chariot races. And it was often the chariot race that started the Olympic Games in the Roman world. John will play on that later. Now try not to read ahead on me because it takes forever when I try to set these up to come up in a sequence. So just stay with me here. Because if you read ahead, you might get a little tripped up. During the Roman days, when the Olympics took place, there was always a pattern or a schedule of the events. The emperor was always present at the games. It was important for the emperor to be present at these games because it was at these games that nearly every city of Rome was represented. So when the emperor would, this is the way it would begin. First, you've got to celebrate your emperor, right? In the Roman world, the emperor does not go unnoticed. He is not ignored. That was probably a big no-no to ignore the emperor. So the Caesar would enter into the arena, or into the stadium grounds, and he would enter into the cheers and the amazement of the crowds. All donned in fashion and certain other colors that would represent his, basically his deification of being a god to the people. We've already talked about that. Then what would happen is a herald that would travel with the emperor. And they would get these guys that had great voices. They would get these guys, and these stadiums and stuff were built in a way where their voices would echo. They were designed in a particular fashion for a reason, so everybody could hear. And so the herald would get up and he would introduce the emperor by shouting his latest accomplishments. So if the emperor had just led a victory against the Goths, which was a neighboring tribe to Rome, he would make sure to announce that. I present to you the almighty Nero. I present to you Domitian, Lord and God, who in his previous campaign against the Goths slaughtered them all, or whatever. I don't know how they really said it back then. I wasn't a herald. Then the Caesar would speak. And because these games had everyone present, he would take that time to pronounce praises and judgments on the cities represented at the games. So it would go something like, to Ephesus, you've done well with the taxes of your people. You have built great buildings. But I have this against you, that in the recent war, you only sent me half of what I demanded of soldiers, or what have you. If you've already noticed a pattern, we're just getting started. Then, step number 4, a chorus of high priests, 24 in particular, would lead the stadium in song, praising the emperor for his almighty deeds. There were 24 because there were 24 state religions, right? Each state religion had a priest who served as an ambassador to the Caesar. And these 24 men, they were always men from what I could research, always traveled with the emperor wherever he went. So when he would come to a city when he would make a Perusia, which was a return, if he gave the city of Sardis money to rebuild, he would come back later down the road to see how his funds were being used, right? Remember that? We talked about that? Or maybe it was simply his first arrival to a city. An advent. It's a borrowed word. It means a coming. They would accompany him then. At his coronation, when he is crowned as Emperor of Rome, these men were present. In the U.S. today, we do have a psalm for our president called Hail to the Chief. I'm not going to sing it up here. I'm not going to play the tune. Look it up if you want to know. Probably already know it. But the Caesar had his own song. And there's not really a lot of records as to the exact words that each of these emperors had. Some of them changed it up a bit, kind of making it more about themselves. You know how that goes. But there were 24 priests of the 24 legal Roman religions that would follow him everywhere. Then the games would open. Another herald would get up and read a scroll. And this scroll was always sealed with one seal. He would break open the seal and he would announce the greatness of Caesar, and he would basically have all these great deeds that the Caesar had done. And this is what ushered in the first warm-up exhibition of the day, of the games. And that was the chariot races. Again, this was by far one of the most exciting and entertaining events of the Roman Olympics. And as far as history has shown us, there were 4 colors represented in the chariot races of the horses. And I don't think it was any coincidence, but lo and behold, look at the colors. White, black, red, and spotted, which was their pale horse. Then, after that race was finished, a trumpet would sound, or trumpets, plural, I'm sorry. Yeah, trumpets. And that is when the rest of the games would follow. Now, if you've read Revelation chapters 1 through 8, you already see the pattern already. You already see it without me going any further. But if you haven't, let's look at it. Presentation of the emperor. Revelation 1a. God is presented, and he is introduced as the what? The Alpha and the Omega. The beginning and the end. The greatness of God is announced in the beginning of the letter. Revelation 1b. The herald's announcements. John hears a voice telling him to write down what he sees, being the amazing greatness of God. The Caesar's pronouncements. We wore those chapters out, didn't we? Revelation 2 and 3. And how did that always go? I think I put that in. Yeah. I've heard about your positive, but I tell you this. And he would talk about their negative deeds. Number 4. The chorus sings the imperial praise. In Revelation chapter 4, that Aiden read, we see the creatures singing to God. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The crowd in Revelation, the 24 elders, dressed in white robes. I want to ask you the question, what do you think the 24 priests of the legal state religions wore? White robes. And you could tell them apart from anyone else in their state religion because often they were seen with golden sashes across their chest or waist. And sometimes they were pictured when they were with the emperor with crowns on their heads. But in that chapter, we read that the elders are casting their crowns at the feet of God. The crowd in Revelation, dressed in white robes, sing with those four creatures mentioned. Number 5, the games are opened. Revelation chapter 5. We've not gotten there yet. But in Revelation 5, we find the slain lamb is found worthy to open the scroll that had how many seals? And it was written on both sides. The greatness of God could not be contained to one side of the scroll, like the Caesar. Chariot races. Revelation 6. The horses and the chariots appear with the colors to match. And finally, the trumpets sound and the games begin in full. Revelation 8. The trumpets sound and the seventh seal of the scroll is broken and the scroll is open. What do you think John is trying to tell the people at this, just in this first part of the book, from 1 to 8? What is John trying to tell these 7 churches?
You hadn't seen anything yet.
You haven't seen anything yet. You think, you look at how obsessed the people are with the Caesar. And look at all the glory he receives by man on earth. But it's almost like John is saying, I've been to the throne room, and the Roman emperor is not there. It's God. Nero is not there. Domitian is not there. None of those guys are even close. And the greatness and the glory and the majesty of God diminishes theirs, destroys it. They have nothing on God. And as we study the chapter, he is going to go verse by verse, pulling scripture from scrolls of old that he no doubt had completely in his heart by memory. I'm not saying he had access to all these scrolls by hand. Maybe, I'm not saying he didn't, but I think a lot of it was he already had that knowledge due to his education. So in the Roman games, again, I'll say this, it was all about representing your God. It wasn't really about your individual talent. That wasn't what mattered. I mean, it did, but you were doing it for your God. As John is writing the letter, he isn't just saying that the games are beginning and Rome seems to have an upper hand. To the Christians, that's what it seems like. Rome's winning. Rome is crushing us. But the way that we compete, the way that we race, the way that we fight, the way that we run will tell the world who our God is and what he's about. It's important also, I put this at the end there, it's also important to note that like whenever you would have a coronation of the emperor, a lot of these steps were pretty similar minus the Olympic Games. But a lot of the fashions of how the emperor was crowned, how he was introduced, how he was put on display for the people of every city that he went to was pretty similar. Didn't really fall far from this. Now, Aiden read chapter 4 in its entirety. So I think what we'll do, if everybody's okay with it, is we'll start going verse by verse. That's all. that's some little print. But I had to fit it all in one slide. So,
It is.
yeah, if anybody can see that in the back, you got great vision. Gotta give you that. Everybody's shaking their head. Nope, can't see.
We have to buy glasses
Yeah.
at the end of the lesson.
Yeah, binoculars. Okay, so
Telescope.
yeah. So when the emperor would arrive in a city, I want you to picture something in particular. When Domitian returned to Ephesus, and this is one event, I just want to use this as comparison. When Domitian became emperor, he came to Ephesus, and he chose Ephesus to be his Neopolis. It was his city of rule. Augustus, the adopted son of Julius Caesar, Octavian, chose Pergamum as his rule. Okay, so just as comparison. But when Domitian went to the city of Ephesus, he gave them so much money to build him a gymnasium/temple. This temple that should have took decades to build, some historians calculate that it should have took well over 50 years, was built in 4 years. Well, Domitian wasn't there the whole time. He had to come back. So when it was announced to Domitian that his gymnasium/temple was done, he arrived in the city by ship. And you can almost imagine it in the way that we've looked at the way these arrivals would work. Picture with me. First, the Praetorian Guard gets off the ship. Those are his secret service. The greatest of the great were the Praetorian Guard. And they surrounded the Caesar and protected him with their life. And then comes the priest that would have came with him from Rome or wherever he was ruling at the time. They would have gathered the people to the harbor or down that street. In Ephesus, you remember that street that went straight up from the harbor. Now the harbor's not there anymore. It's all marshland now where all that sediment flooded in. Remember that? But this street was miles long. And you can almost see it now. All the people gathering on the sides of the street to celebrate and to welcome the Caesar to their city. And as he travels up this street, this marble street, the priests are leading in song, glorifying the Emperor of Rome. The Praetorian Guard was always the most fanciest dressed of all the military. They looked good. They had the flashiest armor. They had the most beautiful colors of their garments. And the Caesar would have been right there in the midst of them with the priest, in their white robes and their golden sashes across their chest, with crowns on their head. And there would be the Caesar, more than likely riding on horseback or in his chariot. And as he traveled up the street, he would have been soaking it all in. The song that they would sing at coronations, for example, was often a song that deified and glorified the Caesar as God of the gods and King of all kings. Again, I want to encourage you to look at this letter and say, what is John saying when he is talking about the greatness of God in this fashion? If you think the Caesar is all that, you haven't seen nothing. God is sitting on the throne, not Caesar. Again, this is very important to remember as we study this book. We'll revisit some of these details as we move on. But without cultural context and without the Tanakh, we are going to get so lost reading this letter. And if you've ever tried to open Revelation, and you've ever just, especially if you just open up in the middle of it, and you don't have these keys, it's difficult, right? It's confusing. It makes no sense, and it's scary. I have heard that a lot. It is scary. We don't have to be scared of it. It's not why John did not write it to scare the first century Christians, did he? That would totally defeat the purpose of the letter. He wrote it to encourage them. So let's begin. Verse 1. After this I looked, and there before me was a door standing open in heaven. And the voice I had heard first, speaking to me like a trumpet, said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must first take place, or what must take place after this." You see John being called to attention at the very beginning of chapter 4. And to his amazement, he sees the supernatural. He is seeing something that no one else is seeing. Look at Ezekiel. Chapter 10, verse 1. I looked, and behold, on the expanse that was over the heads of the cherubim, there appeared to be something like a sapphire in appearance like a throne. Daniel 10:5. I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. God is about to show John what's about to happen, what's about to take place in their day, at their time, just like he did with Daniel in his time, with Zechariah in his time, Ezekiel and Jeremiah in their times. And the other prophets, that's just not even all of them. And in their days, it involved the empires of Babylon and Persia and Greece. Who's John dealing with? Rome. Not the United States government, not Afghanistan, not North Korea. Rome. Rome is the power of their day. Rome is the Babylon of their day, but greater.
And that brings out the point, though, that it was a Babylon of each day.
Yeah.
And so Rome was the Babylon of their day. There's also a Babylon of our day. Would be the extension of that thought.
Yeah.
And that,
You could say that.
That's the powers of today. You know, the powers
Right.
of economic wealth and all these kind of things.
Well, we were just talking about Hellenism. I mean, look at that.
Yeah.
A lot of these things have carried on, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, it's repeats and repeats and repeats.
History repeats
It's
itself.
a loop.
Yeah.
It's just a loop.
Yeah. So, and remember, with, I believe it was Zechariah, we see a lot of similar language. Well, it's changed up just a little bit. So the 7 torches, it was the 7 myrtle trees.
Myrtle tree.
Right. Representative of God's people in that day. Zechariah was talking about, and this was during a time where they were under the boot of the Persian Empire. Now, after Babylon, these empires sort of evolved in a way, I guess you'd say. Babylon was kind of, I'm not going to say barbaric, I wouldn't say that. There were far other nations that were like the Assyrians that were way more barbaric in the way they conquered people. They conquered you, you died. There was no taking you prisoner. Now, Babylon did that as well. But as the ages progressed and as these empires grew and evolved, we see that more and more, especially now that we've gotten to Rome. Because Rome was made up of, I can't tell you how many different tribes or nationalities or cultures of people. And that was one of the problems that Rome had, was how do we get all these people to kind of come under the same umbrella? And we talked about that. It was the worship of the emperor. And it was that evolution of Hellenism among the people, the worship of oneself, the worship of man. That you can do great things. And as we read every verse, I want you to compare. I want you to compare to the praise, devotion, beauty, and the glory that the Romans had for their emperor at that time. Now, I won't read verse 1 again. I put it up there just for reference. And I didn't put the scripture on here. This is in Exodus. We'll look at this in a moment. I did put it in the later slide. But look at the similarity of God calling out to John when God called out to Moses. Mm-hmm. And as the sound of the trumpet grew louder, Moses spoke. And God answered him in thunder. And the Lord came down to Mount Sinai, to the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain. And Moses went up. Both John and Moses had to go up to meet God in these moments. We're going to keep going. Don't get lost. Okay? Verse 2, instantly I was in the Spirit, and there before me in heaven stood a throne. And on the throne, someone was sitting. So we see in many references, we see in Ezekiel where Ezekiel in the Spirit is taken to a different part of his vision on a couple different times. The same thing happens to John as well throughout the letter. In Ezekiel's vision, he goes from place to place in Ezekiel 11, verse 1, and he goes somewhere else in verse 24. In Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1, another apocalyptic book, just like Revelation and Zechariah and Ezekiel. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Each of these men, including John, give this majestic vision of God in the throne room. And they're all pretty similar. There's a few details that kind of change. But it's all speaking the same message, isn't it? About God's greatness, His glory, His majesty. Everything that makes God who He is just so vast and so great that John's mind is just, you can imagine his mind is in overdrive trying to soak all this in. I think I put a question later on in the study. How would you write all this out if you saw it? Where would you even begin? At this point, nothing has been said about the one who sits on the throne and his description. And the one who sat there had the appearance of jasper and ruby. This was sardius stone. It was red. It was like a deep red. Okay? A rainbow that shone like emerald encircled the throne. In your head, you can kind of picture how beautiful this combination of colors would make. Right? When Ezekiel sees the creatures of God moving, he hears the loud sound of their wings, and he notices above them a throne of sapphire. And high up on the throne was the figure of a man. Ezekiel and John are seeing the same thing. They're seeing the same person, the same figure. Exodus 24, God confirms his covenant with Israel, and Moses described God's glorious appearance, and his portrayal of God uses brilliant and beautiful gemstones, just like John did, just like Ezekiel did. Exodus 24, that's the verses 9 through 10. Then Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel climbed up the mountain, right? They were going up to meet God, because God told them to come up. And there they saw the God of Israel, Under his feet there seemed to be a surface of brilliant blue sapphire, as clear as the sky itself. John sees something similar. And the one who sat there had the appearance of jasper, ruby, and a rainbow that shone like an emerald encircled the throne. How would this have made sense to the Jewish audience? How could the Jewish Christian in that Ephesus body, in that Sardis body, wherever it may be, how could they have seen this going back to the Tanakh?
And called up the Sinai.
Yes. You got to go back. You have to go back. You can't go forward with it. You got to go back. Don't make a movie about the Left Behind series. You got to go back. Okay? The high priest, his breastplate, had the following gemstones: sardius, a ruby, topaz, and emerald. That was the first row. Notice any colors?
Yeah.
I underlined one. Okay, gave you the answer there. What's another color you see there that God is? Emerald,
Yeah.
right?
Emerald, sapphire.
Turquoise, sapphire, diamond. Some would even say that the firmament that John is seeing at the feet of the throne, or at the feet of God, was actually like a diamond. It was actually more like a creamy clear, would be precise. We'll look at that in a minute. Have trouble with this word. Jake, who's a
Jasper.
Who's a geologist? Huh?
It's jasper. The one you've got underlined?
No. The
Oh,
one above that. The row above that.
Oh,
Jacket.
yeah.
Jacket.
Jason.
Again, yeah. Jason, and then again,
Jason.
amethyst. Yeah. Okay, that was done. Then the last row was beryl, onyx, and jasper.
Yeah.
So the first and the last gemstone that would have been on the high priest's breastplate are the colors that John sees. God said, I am the beginning and the end, the first and the last. You got to connect those dots.
And from a priesthood standpoint, the priest was intended to be like kind of the go-between, right? They're called to be kind of like Moses, going up the mountain.
Right.
Yeah, and so they come back down and they're shiny. And like Moses was shiny.
Yeah.
And so the in some respects the shininess aspect of it is supposed to bring to mind divinity.
Exactly. Perfect.
And all that's necessary for John is to give them a glimpse. He doesn't
Right.
have to list the same. I mean, he's not quoting from. He's giving an allusion in his words,
Yes.
in their understanding of Jewish thought and Jewish education. They would have, the Jews, of course, would have went back to that and seen there, and the Gentiles, who probably didn't have anything culturally to go on, were being taught
Right.
by the Jews
Yeah.
among them, which was so important for the Jews to be among the Gentiles as the church grew.
Yep.
They needed somebody to be able to say, well, hey guys, this is where he's coming from when he lists these fine precious jewels.
Perfect. Yeah. Somewhere down the line, we lost out on the Jewish interpretation of these scriptures. Somewhere down the line, we stopped looking back at the Tanakh. We did, and that's the truth of it. Whether you,
That probably went back to the Crusades.
yeah, I mean, you could go back. I mean, yeah, at some point down the road, we started looking at the scriptures with a different lens, I guess you'd say, and look at all the confusion that it has led to today. There's a lot of people out there right now that would love to understand this book. They would love to understand it. There's a lot of misconstrued and misinterpretations that you will find all over the web or in books today. Hollywood and our secular world has done a great job at just destroying this letter. Great. By great, I mean horrible, not the positive sense. Now, as we're going to wrap it up here. So when we're back together again in December, we're going to continue on with looking at the rainbow. That's kind of where we're going to end up. So just read the rest of the chapter, read it again, read it a couple times. I'm trying to think if there's something else I need to go over first before we. No, I think we're good where we stop. That way when we pick up next time, we're kind of going into that next verse, starting with the rainbow of emerald that John has seen. So, thank you for your attention this morning.